Hello, my ravens. I was about to do this video outside, but then it started coming a flood in the rain. And the atmosphere would have been perfect, but I'm afraid my book would have got wet. Today we're going to be doing a reading from Accents of Horror. And it'll be a little short story, ironically called Stranger in the Rain. Danny Miller drove aimlessly down the dark road, squinting through each swipe of the wiper blades. About 15 miles back, the rain began in sprinkles and then transformed into a full-out monsoon. This was a recipe for disaster, considering he had not slept in close to 48 hours. Luckily, he had seen little traffic on this highway thus far, and at least he'd quit drinking. 8 months ago, Danny was an average American. He worked 9 to 5 in a factory driving a forklift. It was a non-stop routine, but he was a creature of habit anyway. Plus, he made decent money. He had been married 3 years to a young waitress he met at a diner he had lunch at every day. One day, he walked in and she said, "Let me guess, a BLT and a side of fries?" "Am I that predictable?" he had replied. "Yes, you're in here every day, sweetie. Either you really love the food or you're sweet on me." "Can it be both?" he asked. After that, they dated for 6 months before he married her and her big blue eyes. Everything was great, or so he thought. One day there was an accident at the plant, and it had to shut down. He came home early and hoped to surprise Connie and take her out to dinner. Unfortunately, he was the one in for a surprise. Lying in their bed was Connie and the 18-year-old boy that cut their grass. He was the quarterback of the football team, built and toned body, perfect tan, everything that Danny wasn't. He had looked at Danny like a deer caught in the headlights. Most likely he feared he would never throw another pass due to the fatal case of lead poisoning. Danny was not a violent man. Besides, he was too shocked to be angry, only hurt. When he asked her why, she responded with a laundry list of things that had made her unhappy over the last 3 years, including him not satisfying her sexually or emotionally. It was news to him. She left him, and 2 days later he was served with divorce papers. It was actually quick and painless, at least for her. Now she was happy and in possession of half of everything he owned. After the divorce was final, he was still hurt, but angry now as well. He handled it not by a killing spree with an automatic weapon, but with liquor, the idea being to slowly kill himself rather than anyone else. He went on countless drinking binges and finally lost his job. One day he hated what he saw in the mirror and poured the stuff down the sink. He then gathered up a chunk of his savings and went traveling in search of happiness. Now his only problem was sleeping. It wasn't that he couldn't sleep, it was that he didn't want to. He had begun having the nightmares 5 months ago. Every time he slept, he was visited by the man without a face. It was always the same figure, stalking him, staring at him at every turn. He had no voice, but only pointed at him accusingly. He looked like a normal man, except his face was blacked out, as if the identity were being hidden from television viewers. Danny had finally decided to sleep only when it was absolutely necessary. The only thing keeping him going right now was coffee and enough energy drink to melt his kidneys. The rain began to slack off, and he caught sight of a figure in the distance. A man with a small bag held out his thumb, hoping for some kind stranger to give him a ride. "Are you kidding me?" he said out loud. The guy must have been pretty desperate to stand on a deserted highway at night in the rain. Danny had heard the horror stories about hitchhikers as well as the male fantasies regarding picking up a female needing a ride. Surely they all couldn't be axe-murdering nut jobs. Though all logic said he should keep driving, he had sympathy for the guy, and at the last second he pulled over. Letting down the window, he asked the obvious, "Need a ride, buddy?" In the darkness, only the silhouette of a man could be seen. He took a drag from his cigarette, and the burning red tip glowed in the night. He flicked the cigarette to the ground and walked to the open window. "Aye, that's real kind of you, sir," the man said with a thick Irish accent. "Put your bag in the back and hop in." He nodded and did as he said. The man had short-cropped blonde hair and stubble on his face. He gave Danny a warm smile as he took his place in the passenger seat and fastened his seatbelt. "I appreciate this, sir. With the way things are nowadays, it takes an act of God to get somebody to pull over." "Well, I hate for anyone to be stranded on a night like this." "Aye, 'tis a dark and rainy one it is. I thought I was going to catch my death of pneumonia." He extended his hand to Danny. "Shane O'Brien is me name." Danny shook it. "Danny Miller." "Donnie, is it?" he said with a chuckle. Oh, Donny boy, the pipes are calling, he sang playfully. Judging by your accent, I would say you're very familiar with that song. Ah, yes, I was born and raised in Ireland until I was 24. Then when me wife and I were expecting a little one, we came to America. I don't believe I could lose me accent if I planted myself in the middle of Mississippi. O'Brien, that's a pretty common name in Ireland. Oh, yes, just like Smith here. I've always heard it's a beautiful country. Oh, it is. You'll never see a more beautiful sight than the Irish hills. So, where are you headed to? Danny asked, watching the road with one eye. Nowhere in particular, really. I guess I'm what you would call a drifter. Me too. I'm traveling all around now. Where are you from, Danny? Kansas. Well, isn't that a coinky-dink? Me too. Huh, that is funny, Danny replied with an unintentional flat tone. If O'Brien noticed, he didn't show it. Do you mind if I smoke, Donnie? Not if you crack a window. I've always had pretty bad asthma. Shane nodded his head sympathetically while rolling down the window. The rain had turned into a light mist. Me daughter had asthma, the man said quietly, facing the dark landscape. Where is your daughter? Danny asked, offering the polite human response to such an anonymously stated past tense description. With her mom. Let's just say something happened and me and the wife had to part ways. Danny nodded, not wanting to pry any further. The Irishman took a long drag of his cigarette and blew the smoke out the window. Ah, that's the good stuff. Danny hated awkward silences and thought of anything he might say to continue polite conversation. Do Irish people really drink as much as they say they do? Shane smiled. No, it's actually a lot more. The average Irish blood type is Guinness. Danny laughed at the joke. It's funny, though. I've never been much of a drinker. I got hooked on these damn things as a teenager, though. Everyone has their bad habits. That they do. And dark secrets as well. The last part of that statement sent chills down Danny's spine. He hadn't said it directly to him, but it gave him the creeps nonetheless. With the rain no more than a fine mist, Danny could clearly see down the highway in the distance. A shadow hovered near the white line, and he squinted to try to make it out. He slowed as he thought it might be a deer. When the car was close enough for the headlights to penetrate the inky night, Danny saw that it was a man, but not just any man, but the man without a face. He was now being haunted in the waking world. Jesus! He screamed, gasping. Danny twisted the wheel to the left, sending the car into a slide. As they spun around, he slammed the brake and straightened the wheel. He didn't know where the traction on the slick road came from, but somehow the car managed to do a complete 180 and come to a stop. Pressed hard into the seat and breathing hard, Danny looked to see how his passenger fared. Shane had grabbed the dashboard with both hands and still managed to keep a cigarette between his lips. His eyes said plainly, "What the hell?" Jesus, Donny boy! What did you do back in Kansas? Stunt driving? Danny thought carefully about what he was going to say. Oh, I saw a creepy faceless man that haunts my dreams. It was probably not the best approach. I saw a deer, he said, thinking of what he initially thought the figure was. A deer, was it? You've got better eyes than me, O'Brien said, peeling his fingers off the dashboard and leaning back. After gathering himself, Danny turned the car around and was back on track. They drove for about 15 minutes in the silence that Danny hated. Eventually, they came across a billboard that read Smokey's Diner, 5 miles ahead. Danny's stomach rumbled. Are you hungry, Shane? I think I'm going to stop at this diner for a bite. If you want something, it's my treat. That's right kind of you, Danny, but only if the next meal is on me. Danny nodded, and they drove until the diner came into view. It was a humble little place, but it looked cozy. He parked in the space furthest to the left. A small neon sign in the window flashed the word open to passersby. As they stepped out, light danced across the rain-covered pavement. Shane flicked a cigarette to the asphalt and ground it underfoot. Absently, Danny wondered why. Surely they had a smoking session. A light-sounding bell rang as Danny opened the door. A hefty blonde waitress smiled from across the counter at him. Hey, hun, she said. How are you two tonight? Good, ma'am. Thank you, Danny replied. Shane nodded in agreement. I need to hit the little boy's room, Donnie. Would you order me a turkey club and a cup of coffee? Sure. While Shane disappeared into the restroom, Danny took a seat along the bar. The waitress chewed gum and handed him 2 menus. She hadn't heard the exchange between he and Shane. "What would you like to drink, sweetie?" He ordered a soda with the highest amount of caffeine for himself and coffee for Shane. "Alrighty," she said cheerfully. "I'll be back in a minute to take your order." The name on her name tag read Judy. She was an attractive woman, anywhere from 40 to 45, with a few premature wrinkles from years of cigarettes. The acrid aroma of smoke emanated unabashedly from her pink blouse and skirt. Danny did a double take. She had deep blue eyes just like Connie's. Refocusing, Danny looked over the menu. He really wanted a BLT with a side of fries, but that was too painful a meal to have since the divorce. He decided on a simple cheeseburger with tater tots. Judy came back with his soda and a cup of coffee and pulled out a notepad and a pen. He gave her their orders and she jotted it down. "Okay, I'll have it out in a jiffy." Danny smiled and looked down at the counter. The last few months had been hell. Maybe he was getting to where he could enjoy life again. He was glad he had picked up Shane. Sharing the company was nice. Things got lonely when you were driving from state to state by yourself. Danny looked around the room. The place wasn't packed, but there was a fair number of customers. A mid-30s couple sat in a booth. 2 teenagers occupied another, having a late dinner or early breakfast. One patron was on the far left of the bar and one to the far right. Suddenly, Danny was startled by Judy's voice. "I know what you did, hon. I know your secret." Danny turned to face her, his face flushing pale. "What are you?" His chest clenched as he completed his turn. Where her lovely blue eyes had once been, there was now only a bare skull. Danny tried to speak or scream, but nothing would come. The nightmare waitress lifted her bare, boned left hand and pointed at him. "Guilty," the tongueless mouth uttered in a deep, hellish voice. And that'll do it. If you're curious and want to see more, just get Accents of Horror by Accents of Horror, 4 Flavors of Death, I should say, with guest writer Ellen Mays on Amazon or Kindle. It's only a little over $5 on Amazon and 99 cents on Kindle. You're not going to get much cheaper than that. You're going to get 4 creepy short stories, well worth the money, I think, and enough to creep yourself out. So, if that sounds like something that might interest you, just hit it up. And if you like this video, like it, share, and subscribe to my channel. I try to come up with the most creative videos I can. Sometimes they may be boring, but I try to make them at least a little interesting. And I'm going to have more in the future, and more future books, and more about me. And I always get flustered at the end of these videos when I start rambling. But, as I always say, happy reading.